24-hour optimal any faction, 24-hour specific faction, usable, and wait until mocking. These are not necessarily comments on, once again, this is not a comment on if the commander is good or bad in its entirety. It's just whether or not I would recommend these commanders in terms of optimizing your first 24 hours in game. We're not going to be too cliche with this, but we are going to say that Gandalf the Grey is undeniably the best commander in game, and why I think he is the best 24-hour commander in the game, and why I think that is because very easily he offers you he's loaded with gear. Ignore that though. He offers a early attainable heal. Granted, it's a 50% chance, but you can find a lot of different ways to proc that. You can use a Smite Carver. You can use a Smite Cutlass. You can use a Pierce Bow. You can use gold weapons. And you can use his inherent abilities like Blindside, Surge. And that is nice because in those first 24 hours, you want to try to minimize losses. Other ways to do that are going into fleeting movements, since you're probably not going to be running for a full army in the first maybe hour. You probably are going to have 1 or 2 units. So fleeting movements is nice. There's Mithrandir to give yourself not only mitigation modified by his focus, which you've probably heard me talk about how much I'm a fan of that, but also the fact that if you max it out, you get just an evasion of battle. You also get the ability to go into free peoples for more static mitigation, as well as convener, which gives you a first strike ability and follow-up for more chances to end the battle early. From there, you've got a R3 title, which allows you to stun 2 units, generally speaking. This is just another opportunity to leave your opponent more defenseless in terms of the AI tiles and hit them hard. If you do have him R5, you can go into the White Council tree, but I would say for your first 24 hours, going into a heal build to conserve troops and then eventually get him to level 20 to get his support title unlocked for the 5 skill points, you're going to then want to go into your Mithrandir. But enough on the skilling of Gandalf. He just has a lot in his kit that can be used in any faction whatsoever. He can use almost every single piece of gear that I think is in the game. I don't know if there's really anything that is denied to him. So if you're starting in Loth and Linden, there you go. If you're starting in Rohan, Arnor, Gondor, you can go there. Or you can use this or this. This to proc his healing, this for additional damage. He has access to all the armor types you want, the helmet, so forth. You know, he can use the Wizard Firework, he can use the Hith Lane, he can use the Sustained Pipe. So he is the most versatile commander when it comes to a first 24-hour start. I don't think there's any way... I don't think there's any other commander that can really top what he can do in terms of that first 24-hour optimization. Going back into our list here, I think the next one would probably be... I would argue... And we're going to do this from a Respect 5 aspect, because at Respect 10, some people do move up and down the list, but Respect 5 is generally speaking where most of our free-to-play and medium spenders aim for. I think the next one is going to be Arwen. And I think this list is going to... I play non-RP and RP, but I'm just going to look at this list from purely the good side, from what I'm familiar with, and I'm going to look at them in terms of playing in a good faction with good commanders. I'm going to say Arwen is number 2. While she doesn't have any stuns is easily attainable as Gandalf. What we do have here is... Oh crap, that would have been so silly. We have a very heavy mitigation at the beginning of the... Especially if you have enough points You know, I have our R13s, so granted I have more points, but you could either go into Endumiel, and you can get 2-unit healing. You can get 3 sets of 2-unit healing skills that have chances to proc, and the 2 sub skills are modifiable by focus. So once again, that to me is very huge. This one has a 50% chance of reactivating once, so you've got 2 heals here, you've got a 50% heal activate there, 2 heals here, modified by focus, and removes 1 debuff. And then typically I go into R5 first, but that's only because of how heavy the mitigation is on that. And then from there I go into Parting Gift. And there is no race, there's no race particular for these skills. So I look at it as an extremely beneficial commander to take, maybe not using for all season long, but at least for the first 24 hours. And she can use a very large scale of equipment as well. Not as vast as Gandalf's, but she can get access to the bow, the cutlass, the carver. She can get access to the Hithlane, the pipe, the harp of Lothlorien. She cannot get access to the drum, but typically not many people take that early. Okay. So from there, we're going to look at Aragorn, King of Men, and he can be used in any faction. He obviously is a managed commander, and there is some skills there that are particular for managed units. But where he shines is kind of nice, in fact, because his bottom R0 tree, it can be used at R0. Meaning if you full pull him, you really don't have to put any respect into him to at least get him solid for the first 24 hours. He offers his LSR tree, which is a guaranteed 2-unit heal, and it once again has that 50% activation chance. He has Elven Blessing, which is a modified by focus and reactivating chance, and Exorbitance, which is the popular Gil-galad skill, which gives you plus 14%. And then he's got other skills that you can go into. But if you do have him R5, the nice thing is if you are playing Arnor, Rohan, or Gondor, you can go into his R5 to get access to the Dunedain Bloodline, which gives you, for 1 point, plus 2 attack and defense plus 5. Now, as you put, this is critical, a lot of people think this scale increases, but the attack does not increase. So as you put more points in there, I think you do get up to a maximum of plus 35 defense, which is nice, but your attack will only be plus 2. Personally, because of how little he's used, I think this should be buffed to get to plus 14 attack and plus 35 defense. I think that'd be really strong. Maybe too strong, I don't know. I'd like to see it though, because I hear a lot of people clown on him, and I like him a lot, but I do admit that compared to just high respect Dwallins and R10 Gimlis, that he does fall off. I think Elro here is next on the list, and he's very optimal. Because well, for several reasons. Pretty much because we right in the sub category here, or the parentheses, any faction. I think that's really strong when you can use a commander for any faction. And where are we at? And the nice thing about Elro here is that you get the Merry Pippin War Chant tree. So you get your allied unit level-headed, you get your relief with you get your modified heal with relief, you get your debuff cleanse with level-headed, and you get your War Chant, which, while it's not a plus 3 attack like Dwallin's is, it affects all units, damage plus 30%, and it decreases by a quarter every round once you max it. That's pretty strong. That's almost like a baby guide. You know, guide's 45%, but this is still pretty strong. And the nice thing is that it's something you'll pretty much keep all season long. So it's an easy thing to go into at the first start. If you're playing Erebor, I typically recommend going into his R5 first, and that way allied units damage dealt plus 15% is something that can be affected. It can affect all allied units just for having it. Whereas half Elven, to get a damage bonus, you do need an Elvish unit type. So if you're an Erebor and Elves are the last unit, you're able to get a bonus damage for free, essentially. Whereas half Elven, you need those Elvish unit types to proc the 10%. But this is typically how I would recommend going into him mid-late game. That being said, if you are in Gondor or Arnor or Rohan, I would probably still say Loyal Followers first because of that bonus damage. But if you don't have a lot of like a scale mail or an anti-burn hauberk, or if you don't have any equipment that stacks defense, you can definitely go into Half Elven for a plus 10 speed and defense. Might even work really well working in Rohan with the cavalry builds. But yeah, I typically like to see Lyndon or Loth go for the Half Elven, and then the other factions go for Loyal Followers. But the nice is you have that versatility to make those choices for yourself. So I think he's really solid no matter what faction you start in. And I love the guy. I ran with his R10, and it's just a nifty thing. So we're going to do next, we're going to do Aragorn 2, Tier 2, and we're going to put him in usable because I believe that he is not even optimal in any faction, but I will say that to his credit, he does have skills that can be used from the start. Like the Dunedain Chieftain gives you physical defense and army HP. His Well Prepared gives the ability to proc more hit chances. And I think between those two, there is something to be said about if you don't have a deep roster and you have him, he is usable. I don't recommend it because he doesn't have actual mitigation or actual mitigation. I mean, to be fair, if you have him R5 and you max these two out and you want to go into his R5, you can go into Nobility if you're playing in Arnor, Rohan, or Gondor. But that being said, he doesn't have any sustain. He doesn't have any mitigation, so you are going to need to throw, ideally, a sustain pipe or a Hithlane Mend on him. And it's only going to work so much depending on, your equipment, how deep your equipment list is, and if you have the spares. So he's someone who's usable because of his army defense, his his counterattack, and his nobility. But he doesn't offer any heals or sustain or mitigation. So not somebody I typically recommend. Balin is somebody who I could see being used in a 24-hour period, but he's going to have a specific faction, and that's going to be obviously Erebor. Why do I say that? Because Balin's meta build right now is Retaliate build, which I don't typically go for commanders that require gold items to function, but I will say that the basis of the build is that your Retaliate hits are able to proc the Lord of Moria, which means if you start an Erebor, like setting aside his Retaliate build, but looking at the base of it, if you start in Erebor and you run Dwarven units, you're going to have a chance of recovering this HP when your Dwarven units are doing damage. On top of that, you can go into Dwarven Leader for damage mitigation and a damage boost, and you can also go into your Revivalist, which allows you a rush attack that heals 2 troops, and inspiration, which allows you to buff your troops. So, and then once again, if you have R5, which, a lot of these commanders definitely have bonuses that as you respect them up, they're going to have access to better abilities. And R5 is a nice mitigation. So, pardon me. So saying like if you use them in the first 24 hours and you have enough respect points, which I don't, but let's just say you did, like you're going to get 7% damage received from here. You're going to get 15% damage received from there. That's 22%. That's fairly solid. You're going to get 2 heal abilities here and here, and you're going to get 2 unit damage increases here and here. And what I like about this, I will say to be fair, the fact that it's modifiable by focus, I think is pretty strong. So I've never done the calculations or figured out the formula for that as far as what is the taper off level to where your focus doesn't really increase it, like a diminishing return. But I think between 2 mitigations, 2 damage increases, and 2 heals, there is something to be said about starting with Balin in Erebor. I think Boromir is usable very minimally, but I will say that a couple things to his credit are the fact that He does have a solid top R0 tree, and why I think that is because he's got 2 skills that double attack units, so you're going to be able to hit more of your PvE armies you're facing. He's got a disarm skill that debuffs the next enemy's attack, so there's a possibility that you can... it's almost like sort of like a mitigation skill in its sense. He's also got his bottom R0, which is air, which stacks physical armor and nobility. So you've got a troop defense buff skill and a troop offense buff skill. So air is typically not something I rave about, but I think there is practicality playing an Arnor, Gondor, or Rohan right off the bat and making use of this. I think his R3 tree is absolute hot garbage, but if for whatever reason you were to put points in here, you could at least argue that you're having a chance to evade 1 damage, which is almost like a really strong mitigation in and of itself, and you're also getting HP plus 2. Typically, I recommend skipping this and going into his R3 tree, his R5 tree, and the reason for that is he has the well-prepared counterattack ability, and he has the Horn of Gondor, which not only affects him as a commander, but it affects his allied units to increase their damage for the first 3 rounds. And I think that's really strong when you prepare when you partner it with the nobility tree or the well-prepared, so that you're hitting for higher counterattack damage and higher manish damage. So he's definitely usable. I think he's stronger in... He's definitely usable. He's not that strong to where he has the same thing I think Ballin has that actually make him relatively decent, but I think he is on the same tier of usable as Aragorn, to where they do have skills that would justify using them if your roster was kind of on the light side. I don't know enough really about Círdan, so I'm going to put him on the usable, and we're going to take a peek at him. I don't have him unlocked. I don't have him unlocked, so I need to... White Council is pretty strong, high alert. So... okay, so I'm going to put him as... That's kind of annoying. His top R0 is pretty strong as far as just going right into White Council for the heavy mitigation modifiable by focus, but and the Champion of the Light is solid because it affects all units regardless of race. The high alert, usually you won't have to take that too early. But my issue is that now you really do need to get him to R5, I think, because his only healing source is Parting Gift. And I think that's one of the best healing skills in the game. Fortify is only mitigation on defense, which you're not going to use for the first 24 hours. The Tellery, I'm kind of... I mean, it just puts you back into the fact that he has to be in a specific faction. The outflank is interesting. Yeah, I'm going to put him as... We're going to say R5, so I'm going to put him as usable. But, man, I don't know. You do get healing here, but it's so late round. White Council. We're going to put him as usable in a specific faction, because he's going to have to be in like Loth or Linden. Celeborn, I think, is definitely above Círdan in terms of first 24-hour usage. And I think it's because he's got Guide, which can be used anywhere. He's got Foresight, which is good. Armed Escort is a nice heal ability. He's got Magical Barrier, which is modifiable physical armor. He's got Grey Elf, Shield Training, Deadeye, and then he's got Lord of Morius, or Lord of Lorien. So yeah, he's definitely usable, but he is faction specific because ideally you're going to want to start somewhere ranged, and that's most likely going to be Elven Quarters. Dane, we're going to do Dane next. Dane is going to be something you want to wait till mocking, and the reason for that is going to be his lack of any serious mitigation healing. Where you at, Big Chungus? Okay, so he has... those are all attack. Okay, so there's only two things really I think going for him. Is his King Under the Mountain R5, which is going to be stacking Dwarf Physical Defense as well as HP plus 2 at max level. That is something, but you're also going to have to rely on the fact that you're hoping when all the armies you're facing don't do focus, burn, or poison, because they're going to ignore that. His Lord of the Iron Hills is pretty solid, but it's plus 30% damage, and then you've got your Dwarven Leader, which is another 7%. So you could see 37% in this tree, which is pretty strong. My complaint, though, is that, once again, it's only specifically Dwarven units, and the other skill in there is Fortify, which means, well, you have to be on defense. You're not going to be using that for the first 24 hours. So my issue, though, is that you've got a relatively speaking, solid attack buff and a physical defense stackable buff, but there's no healing and there's no real mitigation. You've got 7% here, and depending on what your equipment's like, you could maybe see another 6 to 12. But use no healing outside of a hit lane with Mend or sustain pipe. So to me, he's somebody you would prefer to wait till you mock him, and your barracks are okay with taking hits. Denethor is going to be... Oof. Denethor is... I think I have to put Denethor in usable. Not somebody I would ever use myself, but to be fair... To be fair, he has healing from ally. He has healing from reinforcement, so there is 2 heal procs. He does have focus modified mitigation from Palantir Scryer. He has no limit stackable damage increase. Granted, it's only to melee units, to fanaticism, and he does have enrage here. So, and Mad Steward. So I think he's usable. Not somebody I would ever use, but if you had a light roster or you're particularly into role playing with a manish, yeah, because this is men deal physical damage, so this has to be a man faction start. So I don't even think I want to say that he's that good at a specific faction. I think he's just usable. Dwalin is somebody you can use in any faction whatsoever. Granted, he is a Dwarven commander, but the reality is that just like Elro here, his base R0 tree is going to be something that can affect all units. 15% speed, 15% defense, army attack. Debuff cleanse, heal all units, and modifiable by focus heals the strongest unit. And then from there, you're going to go into likely his R5, which is going to give you physical defense. Or pardon me, physical damage mitigation. And I think that's pretty strong. It can be used in any faction whatsoever. So do I think he's more optimally used in Erebor? Not. I mean, yes and no, really, because if you have Dwarven gear, then yeah. But if you're just going to add his base skills like we are, I think he can be used anywhere, and I think that's pretty strong. Eladin, I think you're going to be waiting until mocking. Eladin is a elvish cavalry commander in a sense. My issue here is that he has a bottom R0 tree that's not really useless in every aspect, but useless in terms of the first 24 hours. His top R0 is useless to me in the first 24 hours. The only skill here is reinforcement, and to get 7 points in there, you have to put 14 in his damage dealing title, and I just don't think there's enough there to warrant it. If you go into his R3 tree, granted it is like Elrohir's, but where Elrohir has more consistent healing to keep units alive, you have to get 14 points in here to get relatively speaking, a decent mitigation skill, and it's a 50-50 chance. You could get mitigation, you could get a damage boost, and the reality is that I would rather not use somebody who's that much of a glass can in the first 24 hours. I just wouldn't. His R5 is cavalry units, which you're not going to amass that many cavalry units, and then his sub-skill is the same. So he is definitely somebody you're going to wait until you can mock. Falcon, we're going to do Falcon next. Falcon is... He is somebody that can be used in any faction, although I will say he's best served in Erebor. But the reason, once again, it ties back into the same thing. He shares the same tree with Dwalin. This can be used anywhere. You know what? I'm going to actually move him to specific faction because this title is dwarves and this title is dwarves. And while this can be strong on its own, most of the other commanders on our can be used that are optimal in any faction have secondary trees and titles that are effective with all units. So we're going to move him down to the top of the 24-hour specific faction start. Frodo and Sam are going to be wait till mocking. Yeah, we can just take a quick look at them. I honestly don't think we need to spend that much time. This is a damage received, which is a nice increase. This is a 50% chance to evade, but this reduces all the damage. This reduces by 30%, which then negates essentially that in a sense. And to get these two skills, you have to go into this piece of crap. To get, yeah, those aren't even worthwhile, so that's crap. This is a tipping tree, and this is really where he shines as a meme commander. But he doesn't have any mitigation or sustain, so you're hoping that you can somehow proc enough damage to kill the enemy without losing your army. So I think he's crapola. Hey guys, I'm back. So we're going to move on to Elrond next. I think Elrond is somebody that can be used in the first 24 hours, but specifically in LOTR or Linden, and we're going to put him below. We're going to put him below Balin because I think Balin, surprisingly, upon review, has the 2 mitigations, the 2 damage buffs, and the 2 heals. So looking at Elrond, I think Elrond can be used in Loth or Linden for a couple reasons. Even though it's behind this, I actually think this is a pretty somewhat of a decent attack skill, but it hides Convener, which makes him gives him access to Convener, which is one of the reasons Gandalf is so deadly. It also gives him access to Half Elven, which he can use get boon from in Coalition, which you're going to be best served in Loth. Typically, I run him with a full full Elvish lineup, and I get a plus 30% permanent damage bonus, which I also pair with his R5, which is plus 25%. So early game, you can see like really high permanent damage bonuses from elves. He also has access to a sub-skill called Rapid Healing, which actually maxes at 40%. I wish he needs a buff, in my opinion. I wish this was allied army units. If it was melee and ranged, he would be a goat. That definitely limits his entire usefulness by just being allied melee units, because you're typically going to run him with you're going to run him with Herald and then Sentinel Bow Knights, so it's a little kind of annoying. But that being said, you still have an option to go in there, which kind of allows him to heal that quickly. And Lastly, you get mitigation heavy with White Council and High Alert, although typically I don't see reason to go into it too early. But if you do want extra bonus damage, you can go into Champion of the Light. So I think in Lindenloth, he definitely has a place for first 24 hours. Faramir is... I have his R10 cape, and I'm telling you, I just don't think he's worth it without his R10. I think I have to put him on this list for the same reason Boromir is on this list. You do get a rush skill here, which allows you to give all your units initiative next round. So I think it's like a baby convener in a sense, and it goes 5 times off in the battle. You do have another rush skill, so between these two, you'll be able to do some damage to your opponents. He also has Guide, which is a stun immunity and early round damage bonus to your units, and it's all allied. He does have a baby heal here, which is cool. Nice thing is it's modified by focus. And then to taper off, he does have the heir and nobility tree that we thought made it worthwhile to include Boromir. So I definitely have to include Faramir, because it is fair to say, no pun intended, that with 2 rush abilities, a early round stun immunity damage boost, and then a modifiable heal, I think he does actually arguably puts him, I'm going to say, a little bit better, honestly, than Boromir. I don't know enough about Treebeard, but considering his build depends on, technically speaking, mercenary units, I'm going to say he's not first 24 hour. I'm going to say Ori is... Oh, God. I don't want to say... I kind of have to say that Ori actually is first 24 hour. I don't want to say really optimal, but I think he has to be put in that category for the simple fact that he actually matches Dwalin's tree for his bottom R0 and his R5. And I think that's more to be said about him than some other commanders. So we've got our musician tree here, which can be applied to any quarter, any troop, and then you can go right into our R5 title for the physical army damage. So he's optimal in the sense that those skills can be used in any faction you want with any troop you want to use. Hergon is not, I mean, he has got... You know what, I have to put him usable because, to be fair, he does have 2 healing procs. He does have Red Arrow, which recovers 2 units, and he does have Reinforcement. And to be fair, he does have Phalanx. So this only applies to melee units, so it's kind of a specific thing. But I don't think he excels in any specific faction, but he does have 2 units. He does have a physical damage received mitigator, and he does have access to Warden, which allows you to evade 1 instance of damage and give your units some HP. So I think he is usable from that standpoint. He's not shining, but he's usable. Gimli to me is definitely a mock. Legolas is a mock. Definitely Legolas is a mock. I think Gandalf the White is usable for sure. Oh man, there we are. He doesn't have... He's got Magical Barrier here, which is the physical defense modifiable by focus. He's got 2 points of stunning. He's got a focus proc damage dealer, which I think is really strong because, as we know, special focus damage bypasses enemy armor. He's got heavy mitigation through White Council. He's got troop buffing damage by Champion of the Light. And his R5 allows you to get serious enemy damage bonus stacking to where your army can do a lot of damage really quickly. He also gives you plus speed, which I think is pretty nifty. And he does have a heal that's very niche, but I have started to see, I'll be honest, I have started to see a couple whale reports where he does more healing from that than I would expect. That being said, it's whale territory, so I try to keep in mind that that is really not attainable for the average player. So that being said, I think he does have an optimal start in... Actually, I would say he really doesn't. You can spec into the horsemanship, but I actually think it's a detriment to him because it allows you to put 7 points into Champion of the Light. That while it won't affect against like this won't affect against evil men, and this will, I think this allows you to keep his unit roster a wider variety and therefore making him more effective early game. Gil-galad, a very, very powerful start commander. We're going to do this and then do this. I don't think too much needs to be said about him, but we will at least acknowledge that in Loth and Linden, he does definitely shine with his bottom R0 for evasion. 14% damage here permanent and well prepared. We're not going to really take this too often. You might put 1 point for some reason, but there's really no tangible benefit that I can see because I don't think you're going to proc anything else that I see here. And you're most likely going to run double range before you really get to a melee unit. And he does have a nice double stun here with Icicle, and you get some mitigation. You get some more mitigation, which HP. You get a nice solid enemy debuff, and then if you have the extra points and you want to go, you can take a follow-up skill. So I think if you start in Loth Linden, he's really, really solid. It's going to sound crazy. Merry and Pippin definitely have to go up here, and I'm actually going to put, I think I'm going to put him and Radagast up here as well. And the reason both of them are going up there is because Merry and Pippin have the War Chant tree, which gives them access to double heals and a damage buff. And they also, to be fair, have access to a Palantir Scryer, which allows them to mitigate damage on 2 allied units, and it's modifiable by focus. So I think that's pretty strong. And then to top it off, the sub-skill is a non-limit, stackable every round for melee unit damage. So I think those 5 skills actually definitely put him in the running for something you can use optimal in the sense that it can be used in any faction. It may not be as optimal as Gandalf the Grey by far, but you are having access to better starts than a lot of other commanders in your roster if you have the variety. Oh, and then for Radagast, I mean, Radagast is actually going to get moved up the list a little bit from them, but he is a wizard, which means we do have access to 2 things here. We have access to the wizard for the double unit stun. We have access to surge for focus damage, and we have access to, the nice thing is we actually have access to a unique tree here with Radagast. Healer increases the recovery received, so if you go into these skills, you are going to get these nice heals, and you're going to have a chance to go into the Brown, which is a mitigation and a heal chance, both modified by focus. I'm beating a dead horse here. You get army defense, and you actually get the Haven, so you get a very nice amount of mitigation. You get physical defense, you get double heals with a cleanse buff, and you get a stun. So I think that actually puts him above the other 2 guys on the list, and I'm actually going to put him above Dwalin because I think getting more heals out the door is pretty solid. Yeah, I think it's solid. Granted, there could be some back and forth with the Dwalin to Radagast because Dwalin does start to pick up steam pretty well with the with his actual combat abilities. But I'm going to put Radagast there as far as trying to min-max losses. King of Dead, we're going to put him as, you know, let's take a look at him real quick. Yeah, I'm going to say he's not a first 24-hour guy, because if... You've got a debuff here, you've got a debuff here. I mean, that's a debuff for the enemy, but these are both like debuffs for your own troops. Yeah, I'm just going to say he's not a first 24-hour guy, because his gimmick is the Oathbreakers, which are mercenary units. So we're going to put wait until mocking. I don't think too much needs to be said about the cavalry people, but I will say that Theoden and Eowyn, and I guess even Aemir, to be fair, they're good if they start in Rohan or Gondor. I wouldn't put them... You know what, I actually might put Theoden... You know what, I'm going to put... I think I'm just going to be fair and put Elrond lower than them, because Elrond, I think, has higher damage output in the sense of his convener and his R5, but I think there's more inherent value in Aemir, Eowyn, and Theoden because they have access to every round heals, which is pretty strong, and it affects all of the units that are mounted. So granted, his is just melee units, and where you'd want to run him, you wouldn't be using predominant melee units. Emerhill's usable on the same spectrum of Denethor. He has the exact same tree, which I think is straight Garbaggio. But he does have the ally tree, and he does have reinforcement. And to be fair, he has air and nobility, so he gets 2 sources of healing if he's in a specific place. He gets physical defense, and he gets men buffs. And then from there, he does have an R5 title for 1 point that allows you to gain a double debuff protection. So we are actually going to... He makes a case, I guess, if you were going to start in Gondor. Okay, so we are going to put Thranduil in usable in a faction because he's got heals here. He has Grey Elf here. He has these 2 sub-skills. And he's got his R5 for more mitigation. So, yeah, we're going to put him in 24-hour specific faction. I am going to put him just above Círdan, just from what I saw with the follow-up, the double evasion, and the heal. Let's check out our homeboy Stunty. We've got heals here. We've got inspiration bonus damage. We've got the chance to cause a serious debuff. So you've got 2 stunted possibilities. You've got the physical defense stack. You've got mitigation here. You've got mitigation here. Yeah, he's definitely going under... I think he's definitely going under 24-hour specific start. I think he is... And I'm actually going to move Ballin down because these guys still have more healing. I just think he... This is going to be kind of a 3-way. I think Ballin, crazy enough, I think Ballin edges out a little bit, just because he's got 2 sources of healing there, and I think there's a lot to be said about that. He also has mitigation and damage buff, where Elrond only has specific healing, and the faction you'd use him, once again, just is not what you'd run to get the melees. I think... Haldir here can be used first 24 hours, and I think his R5 is strong enough to where, like, this is good, stun immunity, this is good for healing, this is good, you get evasion, This is good for poison damage, which allows you to go into follow-up. And then from there you can go into this for damage reduction, and I think that's pretty fair. But it's going to be Lothlindon is where he's going to have the most success, so that's the tier where he's going. We've got 2 left. Lady of Lothlorien and the King that wasn't. She's got mitigation. She's got healing recovery bonus. She's got a debuff cleanse. She's got parting gift. She kind of, her skills, I hate to say it, are kind of a little sloppy in my opinion. I wish they were a little cleaner. And what I mean by that is I wish that this skill was swapped with this skill. And that way you could get all the healing you want here. You could get the unit recovery, you could get the parting gift, you could get the ring water. I think she's definitely usable. She doesn't have anything that specifically ties her to elves, but because of how spread out her healing is, I think she's usable, but I wouldn't put her optimal, and the reason for that is because you're only going to be using 1 unit heals for so long, and then her skill to get the bulk of her healing is literally just going to be the 1 unit. So I think we're going to put her... arguably higher on the usable than Gandalf the White, but we're going to put her below, but it's going to be kind of a tie in a sense. And then he is going to be... He's going to be above Éomer, but below Éowyn and Theoden. And the reason for that is that he is better started in a Manish faction. His King of the Dunedain, his Dunedain bloodline. Are going to point him towards Manish factions like Arnor or Gondor or Rohan. He can definitely be used in Elvish factions, but I wouldn't recommend that. You're probably going to want to start maybe in even Rohan. That way the second faction or second quarter you unlock is Elves, and you can get your access to the Last Alliance. So yeah, I think he's got a lot of potential, but I think he's best started out in a particular faction. So that is our first 24-hour ranking list on what commanders I think would serve you in the most optimal fashion. And then after that, if you're playing a specific faction, and after that, just baseline usable, and then the last tier, which is strongly wait until mocking. I guess if I had to tweak some, I'd probably drop down these 2 guys into usable. But I just feel like in the sense that they do have skills in healing that allow them to affect any unit. So I think that's pretty viable for a first 24-hour thing. The remaining skills leave a lot to be desired, but there's plenty of commanders that people use for the first 24 hours, like Arwen or Gandalf the Grey, and a lot of them just discard them and put them back in the, and even King Aragorn, and then put him right back in the barracks and don't touch him. So it is fair to say that there is some adjustments that could be made. But this is my list, not yours. Leave some feedback in the comments below, and I hope you guys have a good afternoon.